Hey guys, before we start, if you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. We're a new channel and we're just getting started. These stories take a while to animate, so please support our small team. There's a lot more coming too, so let us know down below in the comments on what stories you guys want to hear next. Thank you so much. We had been looking for a place like that for weeks, something quiet and a little removed, somewhere that didn't feel like a hotel or a crowded rental with too many rules. Most of the listings we saw felt the same, polished in a way that made them all blur together. Then, this one came up. Slightly cheaper than everything else in the area, with photos that looked honest rather than staged. A small detached house, wooden floors, trees all around it, and no immediate neighbors. It didn't feel luxurious, but it felt real, which was exactly what we wanted. We booked it without overthinking, just glad to have found somewhere that didn't feel like a compromise. The drive there took longer than expected, the roads narrowing as we got closer. By the time we arrived, it was late afternoon, the light already starting to fade. The house looked just like the photos, maybe a little more worn in person, but not in a bad way. The key was in a lockbox, just as described, and everything about the check-in went smoothly, which made it easy to relax. Inside, the house was quiet in a way that stood out immediately. The floor creaked when we walked across it, and the doors made soft, dragging noises when they opened. None of that felt strange on its own. It was an old place, and old places make noise. We set our bags down, opened a couple of windows, and walked through each room, just getting a feel for it. Kitchen, living room, bathroom, a short hallway leading to a couple of doors. Everything matched what we expected. At that point, there was nothing obviously wrong. If anything, it felt like we had made a good choice. We settled in pretty quickly, unpacking just enough to feel comfortable. It wasn't until a bit later, maybe an hour or so after we arrived, that I first noticed something slightly off. Just a faint smell in the air that didn't belong. It came and went depending on where I was standing, subtle enough that I could ignore it without trying too hard. I assumed it was just the house being closed up for a while, maybe something to do with the plumbing or old wood, because it sounds like complaining over nothing. But as the evening went on, it became harder to ignore. It wasn't just lingering, it was becoming more noticeable. It still wasn't overwhelming, but it had a weight to it, something that didn't feel like a normal, old house smell. That's when we both acknowledged it at the same time, almost casually. We checked the obvious things first. The kitchen was clean, nothing left behind in the fridge. The bins outside were empty, the sinks drained fine, no signs of anything backed up. Everything looked normal, which somehow made it feel less normal. The hallway was where it seemed strongest. It was short, just leading to the bathroom and another door at the end. I don't remember noticing that door when we first walked through, which might just mean I wasn't paying attention. It looked plain, nothing distinct about it, except for a small sign fixed at eye level. Do not enter. Not handwritten or decorative, just simple printed text. At first, it didn't feel significant. Lots of places have a storage room or a locked space for the owner's things, but the longer we stood there, the more it stood out. It wasn't locked. That was the part that didn't make sense. If it really wasn't meant to be opened, why rely on a sign instead of a lock? We hesitated, but not in a dramatic way. It was more like a quiet back and forth, each of us waiting for the other to decide. Eventually, curiosity won out. I reached for the handle, telling myself it would probably be something simple. The door opened without resistance. Immediately, the smell intensified, stronger than anywhere else in the house. The space beyond the door was darker, a narrow staircase leading down. There was no obvious light switch, just a pull cord hanging further down the steps. At that point, we could have stopped. There was enough there to justify closing the door and leaving it alone, but we didn't. So we started down. The stairs creaked under our weight, louder than the rest of the house. The further we went, the more the air changed. It felt colder, thicker. The smell became something you couldn't push to the background anymore. It was constant, pressing in from all sides. At the bottom, there was just enough space to stand properly. It wasn't a finished basement, more like a rough, low room with bare walls and a dirt floor. The pull cord was within reach, and I remember hesitating for a second before pulling it. The light flickered on, dim and uneven. It took a second to register what I was looking at. In the far corner, partially hidden by old furniture and boxes, there was a long shape on the ground, wrapped tightly in white cloth. It didn't look random or messy. At first, my mind tried to interpret it as something harmless, something stored away, but it didn't hold. The shape was too familiar, too clearly human once you stopped pretending it wasn't. The cloth had dark patches on it, uneven and stained, and one end had loosened slightly, enough to make it impossible to misinterpret. Everything shifted in that moment. The curiosity, the mild concern, all of it disappeared. We didn't move closer. There was nothing else to confirm. We turned and went back up the stairs quickly, not running but not taking our time either. The house felt completely different when we got back to the top. the same rooms, but none of it felt neutral anymore. It felt like we were somewhere we shouldn't be. I called the police without really thinking about it, giving the address, explaining what we had found, trying to keep it straightforward. We went outside to wait. It felt wrong to stay inside, even with the door closed. The police arrived faster than I expected, though it still felt like it took too long. They went in almost immediately after we explained, stayed outside, answering questions, repeating the sequence of events, going over details that seemed small but suddenly mattered. At some point, they tried to contact the owner, but then it became clear that it wasn't just a missed call. The number didn't go through. The account linked to the listing stopped responding entirely. Everything connected to the owner seemed to go quiet at once. No clear return, accounts emptied or inactive. It wasn't a reaction to what we found. It had already been set in motion before we arrived. That was the part that stayed with me the most. Not just what was in the basement, but the fact that it had been there the entire time, hidden in a place we almost ignored. The sign on the door, the smell, the small things that didn't quite add up but were easy to dismiss when we wanted everything to be fine. Nothing about it felt dramatic in the moment. It built slowly, step by step. There wasn't a single moment where it clearly crossed a line until it already had, assuming there would be a normal explanation. There wasn't. I booked the place because it looked quiet, and at the time, that was the only thing I cared about. I'd been working nonstop for weeks, barely sleeping, constantly surrounded by noise, notifications, people. I wanted somewhere isolated, somewhere I could disappear for a couple of days, and not feel like I was being pulled in 10 directions. The listing showed a small, neat house on the edge of a village, surrounded by hedges and a long gravel drive. It looked clean, minimal, almost staged in a way that made it feel safe. Peaceful countryside retreat, the description said. It felt like exactly what I needed. Check-in was contactless. There was a lockbox by the door, a key inside, and no sign of the host anywhere. I remember thinking how convenient that was at the time. No awkward small talk, no waiting around. I arrived just as the light was starting to fade, that dull gray hour where everything outside starts to lose its detail. The house sat completely alone. Inside, everything matched the photos almost perfectly. The air smelled faintly of cleaning products, sharp and artificial. The living room was small but tidy, with a gray sofa and a low table. The kitchen was compact, tucked into one side with neatly arranged utensils. A short hallway led to the bathroom and a single bedroom at the end. I did a quick check out of habit, opened cupboards, checked behind doors, pulled back the shower curtain. Nothing unusual. It was when I stepped into the bedroom that I noticed the teddy bear. It was sitting on a wooden chair in the far corner of the room, angled directly toward the bed. At first glance, it looked ordinary enough. Light brown, soft-looking, the kind of generic stuffed toy you might expect in a child's room. It had been placed there, carefully, facing the bed like it had a purpose. I stood there longer than I should have, trying to figure out what exactly was bothering me. The proportions felt slightly off, the head a bit too large, the eyes too glossy. Eventually, I laughed it off, telling myself the host probably had a kid or had just forgotten to remove it between guests. Still, I walked over and turned the chair so the bear faced the wall. The evening passed quietly, too quietly, in hindsight. The signal on my phone was weak, and after a while, I gave up trying to stream anything. I made some tea, sat on the sofa, and listened to the silence. It wasn't the peaceful kind I'd imagined. It was dense, almost heavy, like the house was sealed off from everything outside. Every small movement I made seemed louder than it should have been. By the time I went to bed, I was more tired than relaxed. When I turned off the light, I noticed a faint smell in the room that hadn't been obvious before. It wasn't strong, just a stale, fabric-like scent that didn't match the rest of the house. I lay there for a while, adjusting to the darkness, listening. After a few minutes, I started noticing sounds. Small, irregular ones. Old house, I told myself. Wood settling, pipes shifting. Eventually, the exhaustion caught up with me, and I drifted off. I woke up suddenly in the middle of the night without knowing why. The room was completely dark, but something felt different. There's a kind of awareness you get sometimes, like your body has noticed something before your mind has caught up. That's when I heard it again. A soft sound, closer this time. Not a creak, not quite a tap. More like something shifting slightly, fabric brushing against wood. I turned my head toward the corner of the room. Even in the dark, I could make out the outline of the chair. And the bear. It was facing the bed again. I didn't move. I just stared at it, trying to convince myself I'd imagined turning it, or that it had somehow shifted on its own. I lay there for what felt like hours, my eyes fixed on that shape in the darkness. In the morning, the house felt different. Nothing had changed visually, but the atmosphere had shifted. I went straight to the bedroom and walked over to the bear. In daylight, it looked less unsettling, but up close, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. One of the eyes wasn't quite right. The left eye was normal, black plastic, slightly scratched. The right one looked similar at first, but there was a faint ring around it. I picked it up, and the weight surprised me. It was heavier than it should have been. A cold feeling settled in my stomach as I turned it toward the light. Inside the right eye, barely visible unless you were looking directly at it, was a tiny, perfectly centered pinhole. A camera lens. For a moment, I just stood there, holding it, unable to process what I was seeing. Then the realization hit all at once, sharp and overwhelming. I dropped it onto the bed and stepped back, suddenly aware of the entire room in a way I hadn't been before. My hands were shaking when I grabbed my phone and messaged the host. I kept it simple, trying not to sound panicked. Hey, quick question. There's a teddy bear in the bedroom with what looks like a camera inside it. Is that yours? The response came quickly. No idea what you mean. There shouldn't be a teddy bear in there. I stared at the message, then sent a photo. There was a longer pause this time before the reply came through. That's not mine. I've never seen that before. There's definitely a camera in it, I replied. Another pause. Are you sure? Maybe it's just part of the design? I didn't answer after that. Instead, I spent the next hour searching the house. I checked every room, every corner, looking for anything else that didn't belong. I unplugged devices I didn't recognize, examined the smoke detector, even checked inside the vents. I found nothing. That should have been reassuring, but it wasn't. If anything, it made the situation feel more deliberate. I was in the kitchen, trying to decide whether to leave immediately when I heard it. A loud, sudden thud. It came from inside the house, from the wall near the bedroom. I froze, every part of me going still. For a moment, I tried to rationalize it. Something falling, maybe, or shifting behind a panel. But there hadn't been anything there. Then came a second sound. A dragging scrape, like something moving carefully. Inside the wall. The realization came before I could stop it. Not a guess, not a theory. Someone was in there. I moved slowly down the hallway, each step deliberate, barely breathing. In the bedroom, I went straight to the wall, where I'd heard it. At first, everything looked normal, but when I ran my hand along the surface, I felt a slight inconsistency, a section that didn't quite match the rest. There was a seam. It was subtle, almost invisible, unless you knew where to look. A thin outline, just wide enough to suggest a panel. My fingers found a small indentation near the edge. I hesitated, every instinct telling me to stop, but I pressed anyway. The panel shifted inward, with a soft click. The smell hit me first. Not the stale fabric smell from before. Something stronger, heavier. Unwashed clothes, dampness, something faintly sour. I pushed the panel open just enough to see inside. There was a narrow space between the walls, deeper than I expected. Not empty, lived in. A thin mattress lay on the floor, flattened from use. There were blankets, tangled and worn, empty bottles, food wrappers, a small pile of clothes shoved into one corner. The air inside felt warm, like someone had been there recently. I stepped back, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might give me away. I didn't check further. I didn't call out. I just backed out of the room, grabbed my phone, and left the house. I called the police from my car. From the outside, it looked exactly the same as when I'd arrived. I noticed something I hadn't before. The curtain in the bedroom window shifted, just slightly. Not enough to be certain, but enough that I didn't stay to see if it would happen again. I thought I was getting a great deal. That's how it always starts, right? I was scrolling through Airbnb looking for a place to crash for a couple weeks while I was working on a short job away from home. I didn't want to blow all my money on hotels, so I filtered by budget and found this spot that looked way too good to pass up. The photos showed a bright, clean room with a big bed, nice sunlight through the window, a little desk tucked in the corner, even a small bookshelf. The description called it a quiet retreat with cultural warmth, and the reviews were vague but positive. Stuff like unique living and very welcoming. At the time, I thought that sounded kind of cozy, so I booked it for 16 nights at $42 a night. Not the cheapest, but cheaper than anything else in the area, especially for how nice it looked online. I got a message from the host right after, calling me family and saying he looked forward to sharing culture. At that point, I figured he was just overly friendly, which I thought was fine. The day I arrived, I already started getting weird vibes. The house was on a side street, kind of run down looking from the outside, chipped paint, uneven stairs leading up to the front door. Definitely not the same vibe as the photos, but I told myself maybe the inside was better. I dragged my suitcase up and rang the bell. A woman I didn't recognize answered, not the host. She barely said anything and just waved me inside. As soon as I stepped in, the smell hit me first. It wasn't dirty exactly, but it smelled like too many different foods cooked in the same kitchen without windows open. Like curry, onions, garlic, and something fried all blending together. The hallway was narrow, lined with shoes of all sizes. That's when I started realizing something wasn't right. The host eventually came out from one of the rooms, all smiles, hugging me like we were old friends. He gave me this speech about how everyone in the house was family and how I'd learned so much from sharing culture. He opened the door to what was supposed to be my private room, and my stomach dropped. There were clothes piled on the bed. Not mine. Someone's jacket was thrown over the chair. A duffel bag was half unzipped on the floor. It looked like someone was already living there. I asked him about it, and he just grinned and said, "Oh, don't worry. They're also family, just sharing space." That first night was chaos. Strangers kept coming and going through the hallway outside my room. At one point, I counted at least 9 different people. Some looked like they lived there, some just visiting. None of this was mentioned in the listing. The so-called shared culture thing basically meant the host was cramming as many unrelated people as possible into his house and charging everyone. My private room wasn't private at all. Twice that night, people opened the door while I was in bed, acting like it was their room too. I barely slept. Every sound made me jump. Someone was cooking at 2 in the morning. Another person was blasting music on their phone in the hallway. A couple argued loudly in a language I didn't understand. My suitcase was wedged under the desk, and I kept checking to make sure it was still there, like I didn't trust the situation. The next day, I confronted the host. I told him the room wasn't what I booked and that people were literally walking into it. He just laughed it off and said I was being too Western and not open to culture. He kept repeating that in this house everyone was family and that privacy wasn't important. I couldn't believe it. I tried messaging Airbnb support, but their responses were slow and they wanted proof. I snapped photos of the room with someone else's stuff in it and the crowded hallway, but the host caught me taking pictures and told me that it was disrespectful to the family. At that point, I just wanted to leave, but the problem was I didn't have enough money for a hotel, and Airbnb support was dragging their feet. I stuck it out for another night, but it was worse. I woke up to find my desk chair missing because someone had dragged it into the hallway to sit on. My blanket smelled different, like someone else had used it during the day while I was out. The bathroom was constantly occupied, like a revolving door. I once waited 45 minutes just to brush my teeth. The craziest moment came on the 3rd night. I woke up around 4 in the morning to a loud knock on the door. Before I could even get up, the door opened and a guy walked in holding a plastic bag of groceries. He saw me in bed and just shrugged, then stuffed the bag into the closet. I didn't sleep after that. I sat upright on the bed till sunrise, just waiting for Airbnb to confirm my refund request. When I finally left, the host tried to guilt trip me, saying I wasn't ready to be part of a real family and that I was too stuck in my own culture. I didn't even argue. I just dragged my suitcase out of there and booked a cheap motel 20 minutes away. It wasn't fancy, but at least it was quiet and no one was walking into my room in the middle of the night. Later, Airbnb refunded half my stay after I kept pushing, but the listing was still up months later when I checked. Same photos, same description, and probably the same setup. I realized those vague reviews about unique living and welcoming family were probably written by people too uncomfortable to tell the truth. Looking back, I don't even think the host saw it as wrong. He genuinely believed cramming strangers into one house was a cultural thing, when in reality, it was just him cashing in. And the worst part is, if you look at the listing online, you'd never guess any of it. That's the last time I ever booked something, just because the photos looked nice and the reviews sounded warm.